The day Isabella Thorne pushed her college sweetheart, Ethan Vance, into a top spot at the company, I knew my time was up. She slammed her hand on my desk in front of the entire executive team. Julian Croft, give the vice president position to Ethan. You're being reassigned to director. I smiled and tore my shareholder agreement to shreds. No need. I quit. When we were handed the divorce decree, she sneered. Without me, you're nothing. Mr. Croft, Ms. Thorne needs you in the main conference room. The voice of my assistant, Chris, was stretched taut over the phone, like a string about to snap. I was staring at a quarterly business analysis on my monitor, the dense grid of data, the result of 3 straight all-nighters. I tapped my fingers on the cool surface of the mouse twice. Got it, I said, my voice flat, and saved the document. Pushing open the heavy, frosted glass door to the conference room, the low hum of conversation choked and died. The long table was lined with the company's core executives, and every single one of them was staring at me with a look of morbid curiosity before their eyes darted to the unfamiliar figure seated next to the head of the table. In the chairman's seat, Isabella Thorne was a portrait of corporate power in a sharp, iron gray designer suit. Her long hair pulled back so tightly it exposed her forehead and the severe arch of her eyebrows. She wasn't looking at me. She was angled slightly, murmuring something to the man beside her, a man in a casual beige blazer with a gentle, disarming smile. A rare curve of softness touched Isabella's lips. I knew that man. Or rather, everyone in the company's upper echelon knew that face. Ethan Vance, Isabella's college sweetheart. The one that got away. The legend who she never quite got over, even after he'd moved overseas. And now, here he was, sitting comfortably in the seat to Isabella's right, the seat that had always been reserved for the company's second-in-command. I didn't break my stride, walking directly to my usual chair at Isabella's left. The sound of the chair scraping back echoed in the tomb-like silence of the room. Everyone's here, Isabella said, finally looking up. Her gaze swept the room before landing on me, and that fleeting softness vanished, replaced by the cold, hard edge of business. I have an important personnel change to announce. She gave no one a moment to prepare. Her manicured finger tapped the polished surface of the table, a sharp, deliberate sound aimed directly at me. Julian, she said, her voice low but piercing with indisputable authority. As of next Monday, you will no longer serve as the executive vice president of business operations. The air in the room turned to ice. A few of the VPs instinctively held their breath, their eyes darting between Isabella, Ethan, and me. Isabella lifted her chin slightly, gesturing to the man beside her. Her tone was as flat as if she were archiving file. Mr. Ethan Vance will be taking over your position, with full oversight of the group's core business sectors. She paused, her eyes locking onto mine, delivering the final blow like a routine directive. You will be reassigned to director of the marketing department, reporting to Vice President Vance. A collective, stifled gasp went through the room. Even though they'd sensed something was coming, the raw humiliation of the demotion was a bomb dropped into still water. Director of marketing? That was a 2-level drop from my current position, and I was expected to report to a complete outsider, an empty suit who knew nothing about the company's operations. A flood of gazes, shock, pity, a few tinged with schadenfreude, were fixed on me. Ethan chose that moment to stand, a perfectly calibrated, humble smile on his face. He gave a slight nod to the room. I appreciate the trust Ms. Thorne has placed in me. I'm new here, and I look forward to learning from all of you. His eyes then shifted to me, his smile widening with the magnanimity of a victor. I'll especially be relying on Director Croft. I'll need you to show me the ropes when it comes to the business side of things. I hadn't said a word. I was leaning back in my chair, my expression unreadable, a ghost of a smile playing on my lips, as if the man being publicly stripped of his power and ground into the dirt wasn't me. I just watched Isabella, watched the face that had once in countless late nights been my comfort, now a cold, alien mask. My silent stare seemed to unnerve her. Her brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, and her voice grew colder. Director Croft, do you have a problem with that? This is a corporate decision. Finally, I moved. I rose to my feet slowly, my movements deliberate. I didn't look at Ethan. My eyes remained fixed on Isabella, the faint smile on my lips deepening, but it was utterly devoid of warmth. A problem? I repeated softly, the word carrying clearly across the silent room. I reached into the inner pocket of my suit jacket and pulled out a dark blue portfolio. Inside was my original shareholder agreement, the document that signified my status as a founding partner. Under the stunned gaze of everyone present, I gripped the portfolio with both hands, my knuckles turning white from the pressure. R.I.P. The sharp, decisive sound of tearing paper shattered the stillness. My expression was blank as my hands moved with steady force, once, then again, ripping the document that represented my wealth, my position, and years of sacrifice into halves, then into quarters. Snow-white scraps of paper fluttered from my fingers, scattering across the gleaming tabletop like a sudden, unseasonable blizzard. The color drained from Isabella's face. She shot to her feet. "Julian, what are you doing?" The smile on Ethan's face froze, his expression a mask of disbelief. I let the last of the pieces fall from my hands. I dusted off my palms, though they were clean, and met Isabella's furious, shocked gaze. The cold smile finally bloomed into a full, chilling grin. "Reassign me?" My voice was clear, infused with a sense of finality. "Ms. Thorne, there's no need to go to all that trouble." I scanned a room of dumbfounded executives, my eyes finally settling on Isabella's pale face. I spoke each word with the force of a gavel strike. "I quit." Without another glance at anyone, I turned, pushed my chair in, and strode toward the conference room door. The sound of my leather shoes on the plush carpet was a dull, steady rhythm, each step landing like a hammer blow on Isabella's suddenly erratic heartbeat. "Julian, you get back here." Isabella's shriek echoed behind me, laced with a panic she herself didn't recognize. My hand was already on the cold, metal door handle. I paused, turning my head slightly, but I didn't look back. "Ms. Thorne," my voice came, muffled slightly by the door. "The transition email will be in your inbox in 30 minutes. Click. The heavy door closed softly behind me, sealing off the dead silence within and severing the last, frayed connection between Isabella Thorne and me. The heavy mahogany door of the CEO's office flew open, slamming against the wall with a dull thud. Isabella stormed in like a blizzard, her heels clicking an angry, rapid-fire beat against the expensive marble floor. She marched to the massive executive desk and slammed both palms down on its surface, the impact making the pens in their holder jump. "Julian, what the hell was that?" Her chest heaved, the sharp lines of her makeup unable to contain the fury blazing in her eyes. "Tearing up your stock grants in front of the entire executive team? Just walking out. Do you think this company is a playground you can just leave whenever you want?" I was standing at the floor-to-ceiling window, my back to her. Outside, the steel and glass skyline of the city was a cold, gray monolith under a heavy sky. I held a cup of long, cold black coffee, no steam rising from its surface. Hearing her tirade, I didn't even move my shoulders. I simply tilted my head back and drained the bitter, cold liquid in one swallow. I turned around, my face a blank canvas, my eyes a desolate landscape. I placed the empty cup on the corner of the desk with a soft click. It meant what it sounded like, I said, my voice raw and tired, as if scraped with sandpaper. "I quit. I'm done." "You're done." Isabella laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. She rounded the desk, closing the distance between us, searching my face for any sign of regret or petulance. "Julian, are you seriously trying to pull this stunt with me? Do you think this threatens me? That it will make me change my mind? How old are you?" She jabbed a finger toward my face, the tip trembling with rage. "Without me, without Thor Industries, what are you, Julian Croft? You were just a scholarship kid from the wrong side of the tracks who got lucky when the great Isabella Thorne gave him a chance." I finished her sentence calmly, my tone devoid of emotion, as if stating a fact about a stranger. I met her gaze, my own eyes so placid they were terrifying, like a frozen lake. "You've been saying that for years." My unnerving calm seemed to prickle her. Underneath that icy surface, she could sense something had irrevocably shattered. She pushed the strange feeling down, her voice rising to a shrill, defensive pitch. "Was I wrong? Without my family, would you have any of this? Would you be in the position you are today? And now, because of a simple reassignment, You throw a tantrum and walk out. Julian, do you have any sense of responsibility? Responsibility? I repeated the word slowly, a faint, cold smirk twisting my lips. It was a mockery of both her and myself. Is my responsibility to stand by and watch you install your long-lost love into the company, then personally hand him to the position I bled for on a silver platter? I took a step forward, closing the space between us. She was so close now, she could see the web of broken capillaries in my eyes, could feel the profound exhaustion and disappointment rolling off me in waves. Isabella. I used her full name, my voice low, but each word a razor's edge. All these years, I have worked myself to the bone for this company. The all-nighters, the client dinners that ended with me sick from too much scotch, the deals that fell through only for me to claw them back. In your eyes, was any of that worth more than him simply deciding to come back? She flinched, taking an involuntary step back, her eyes flickering. You're being ridiculous. This was a standard corporate restructuring. Ethan is qualified. He has a global perspective. He's qualified? I cut her off, the cold smile now tinged with genuine, bitter amusement. Qualified for what? Writing bad poetry in a coffee shop? Or living off your family's name while he found himself in Europe? Isabella, wake up. Putting him in that position isn't helping him. It's throwing him to the wolves. And you're pushing the entire company off a cliff right along with him. Enough! She shrieked, like a cornered animal, her face flushed with a mixture of shame and the anger of being exposed. This is my company. I'll hire whoever I want. It's not your place to question me. Julian, I'm telling you, your actions today have severely damaged this company's interests and reputation. You will go back, right now, and apologize to the entire executive team. And you will retract your resignation. Apologize? I looked at her, and the last flicker of warmth in my eyes died, leaving behind a chilling void. I shook my head slowly, a gesture of absolute finality. Isabella, we should have ended this a long time ago. My voice dropped, heavy with the weight of years of exhaustion. And I'm not just talking about work. Her heart hammered against her ribs. A profound sense of dread seized her. What were you trying to say? I didn't look at her. I walked back behind the desk and pulled open the bottom drawer. It didn't contain files. Inside lay a single, small, navy blue velvet box. I took it out and opened it. Two simple, platinum wedding bands rested inside, reflecting the cold light of the overhead fixtures. One was slightly wider, the other thinner. We had bought them when we got married. I had never taken mine off. She, it seemed, only wore hers to weddings and the occasional charity gala, where we needed to present a united front. I picked up the man's ring, my thumb stroking the cool metal surface for a moment. Then, without hesitation, I slid it off my finger and placed it back in the box. The motion was clean, devoid of sentiment. Tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock, I said, closing the box. I looked up, my gaze locking onto Isabella's suddenly ashen face. Bring your driver's license and any other required documents. I paused, then spoke the final two words. The courthouse. Chapter 3. The county courthouse lobby smelled of antiseptic and old paper, mixed with the faint, oppressive aura of countless bitter endings. The air was thick and hard to breathe. I sat on a cold, blue plastic chair, my back ramrod straight, an unmoving sculpture. I had arrived early. The hall was mostly empty, save for a few other silent couples scattered in the corners, staring at the floor, a vast, invisible chasm separating them. Click, clack, click, clack. The familiar sound of heels on linoleum approached, the rhythm deliberately measured. Isabella had arrived. She wore an impeccably tailored black suit, her makeup flawless, her red lips pressed into a stubborn line. Her chin was lifted, projecting the image of a proud peacock ready for battle. She walked past me and sat down, leaving one empty chair between us, a buffer zone that felt as wide as an ocean. Neither of us looked at the other. Neither of us spoke. The silence was a physical weight pressing down on us. Number 37. Isabella Thorne. Julian Croft. A clerk's monotone voice called out from a window. We both stood and walked, one after the other, to the small, sterile counter that marked the end. A middle-aged woman with a weary, seen-it-all expression sat behind glass. Paperwork, she said without looking up, her hand outstretched. 2 sets of documents, 2 driver's licenses, were pushed under the partition. The clerk processed the information with mechanical efficiency, her fingers clattering on the keyboard. "Do you have the divorce agreement?" she asked. "Here." I pulled 2 copies from my briefcase and handed them over. The terms were simple. I was walking away with almost nothing, just my personal savings and the old car I've been driving for years. The shares in Thorne Industries, the real estate, the other assets, I wanted none of it. Isabella glanced at the agreement, her lips parting for a moment as she saw the property division clause where I'd relinquished everything. But she said nothing, pressing her lips tightly together again. She took the pen and signed her name with sharp, angry strokes. I signed my name as well. My handwriting was steady, without a tremor. The clerk took the signed papers, reviewed them one last time, then produced 2 small, dark red certificate folders. She affixed our photos and picked up the heavy, official seal. Chunk! The seal came down with a solid, definitive sound, embossing the crimson paper, a sound that seemed to echo in the hollows of our broken marriage. Chunk! A second time. 2 fresh, new divorce decrees were pushed through the slot. "You're all set," the clerk said, her voice unchanged. I reached out and took my copy. The cover felt cold, foreign. I didn't even open it. I simply slid it into the inner pocket of my suit jacket, as if it were a meaningless expense report. Isabella picked hers up. She stared at the gold-embossed words, "Decree of Divorce," for a few seconds, her knuckles white. Then she snapped her head up, her eyes finding me as I was turning to leave. "Julian," she called out, her voice sharp in the cavernous hall. I stopped, but didn't turn around. She strode in front of me, blocking my path. She held the new decree up, waving it in my face, a cruel, cold smirk twisting her lips. "Do you see this?" Her voice was laced with venom, each word a shard of ice. "Without me, without Thorne Industries, you, Julian Croft, are nothing." She stared into my eyes, searching desperately for a flicker of pain, regret, or anger. She needed to see me break, to see me lose my composure, to see me admit that she had won. But I just looked at her calmly, my expression as deep and still as a well, without a single ripple. There was no anger, no sorrow, not even hatred. There was only a profound, soul-crushing indifference. I sidestepped her, as if she were nothing more than a column of air. "Is that so?" I asked quietly, my voice as light as the wind, but carrying an immense weight. I didn't pause. I didn't look back. I just kept walking towards the glass doors of the courthouse, doors that symbolized both an end and a liberation. Sunlight streamed in, bright and blinding. My silhouette, stark and solitary, walked steadily into the light and disappeared, never once looking back. Isabella was left standing there, her hand frozen mid-air, the ugly smirk congealing on her face like a cheap mask. She watched the unhesitating figure vanish into the sunlight, and a sudden, overwhelming wave of ice-cold panic washed over her, so intense it nearly buckled her knees. The little red folder in her hand suddenly felt like it was burning her skin. Chapter 4. Thorne Industries, top floor, CEO's office. Beyond the massive windows, the city was coming alive with light, a glittering tapestry of neon that sketched out a prosperous skyline. But the atmosphere inside the office was a stark, suffocating contrast. Isabella threw a financial report onto the expansive mahogany desk with a violent slap. Pages scattered, revealing a sea of glaring red numbers indicating massive losses. "What in God's name is this quarterly report?" She shot up from her chair, her hands braced on the desk as she leaned forward like a cornered lioness, her sharp gaze sweeping over the department heads standing before her. "Can someone explain to me why profits in our core business sector have fallen off a cliff by 30%? Why?" The director of marketing, a balding, middle-aged man, was sweating profusely. He wiped his brow, his voice trembling. "Ms. Thorne, it's mainly a few of our key accounts. The ones that Mr. Croft personally managed. He had deep relationships with them. Since he left and Mr. Vance took over, we tried to reach out, but they've been cold. Some have terminated their renewal negotiations altogether." "Client relations?" Isabella scoffed, as if it were the most ridiculous excuse she'd ever heard. She slammed her fist on the desk again. You're telling me our client relations depend on one man who doesn't even work here anymore. What is the marketing department for? And where is Vice President Vance? Isn't he in charge of the core business? What is he doing? Her sharp glare landed on Ethan Vance, who stood to the side, his face pale. Ethan flinched at being called out. He quickly composed himself, forcing his usual gentle smile. Isabella, don't worry. Market fluctuations are normal. I've personally visited those clients. It might just take some time to build a new rapport. Rest assured, I'm already developing a new marketing strategy. We'll stabilize the situation soon. Soon? How soon? Isabella cut him off without a shred of courtesy, her eyes like daggers. Ethan, I put you in this position to get results. Not to hear the word soon. I want outcomes. I want real performance, not empty promises. She pointed a trembling finger at the damning report on her desk. Look at these numbers. Just look at them. Is this the best you could do after 3 months? Is this your global perspective and qualification? The smile finally slid off Ethan's face, leaving a stiff, humiliated expression. Isabella, let me explain. The situation is more complex than we thought. Complex. Isabella's laugh was cold and sharp. Or maybe some people aren't qualified and make simple things complex. She ignored him, her gaze sweeping over the others. I don't care how you do it. By next month, I want to see these numbers turning around. If not, all of you, including you, Vice President Vance, can pack your bags and get out. Meeting adjourned. The executives scurried out of the room as if they'd been granted a pardon, their heads down, their footsteps quick, terrified of being incinerated by her rage. Soon, only Isabella and a stone-faced Ethan remained. Isabella, you were a little. Ethan began, trying to soften the mood. Get out, she said, her back to him, her voice a cold, weary whisper. I want to be alone. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He gave her rigid back a complicated look and quietly let himself out. The door clicked shut. The office was plunged into a dead silence. Isabella collapsed into her large leather chair as if all her bones had dissolved. She covered her face with her hands, the coolness of her fingers a stark contrast to her burning skin. Her body began to tremble uncontrollably. The last 3 months had been a waking nightmare. The indifferent, almost placid look in Julian's eyes as he left had become a thorn lodged deep in her heart. She had expected him to come crawling back, to regret his decision, to apologize as he had after so many of their arguments. She had even rehearsed how she would magnanimously forgive him and allow him to return. But he never came. He vanished completely, like a drop of water evaporating into thin air, leaving behind nothing but a rudderless company, beginning to list dangerously. And Ethan, Isabella closed her eyes in agony. She had once thought of him as the poetic, brilliant soul who had illuminated her youth. But when he was placed in a position that required real-world grit and strategy, all she saw was indecisiveness, arrogance, and a complete inability to handle complex situations. He was all theory and no substance. He had no idea how to handle the company's shrewd, cutthroat clients. He didn't understand the intricate internal politics. He was utterly lost in the rapidly changing market. His so-called global perspective was laughably fragile in the face of brutal reality. And Julian, the man she had believed was nothing without her family. He had been the anchor holding the entire ship steady. When he was there, no one noticed his importance. She had even found him tiresome. But now that he was gone, the ship was rocking violently, exposing countless hidden cracks and threatening to capsize. Isabella's eyes flew open. She grabbed her phone, her knuckles white. She scrolled to a number in her blocked list, her finger hovering over the screen, trembling violently. A powerful, toxic wave of regret, resentment, and a terrifying emotion she refused to name crashed over her, threatening to drown her. Chapter 5 Crash. Another binder hit the conference table, its contents spilling across the polished wood. Useless. All of you are useless. Isabella's roar filled the room. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she looked like a trapped animal, pointing a trembling finger at the stock chart on the projector screen. The line was a nosedive, a plummeting red streak of disaster. 3 days. In just 3 days, our market cap has evaporated by 40%. Is this what you call stabilizing the situation? The room was deathly quiet. Every executive stared at the table, wishing the floor would swallow them whole. Ethan Vance, seated at her right, was ashen. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his lips trembled, but no words came out. The high-stakes Southbridge Tech acquisition he had personally spearheaded was a catastrophic failure. Blinded by arrogance, he had underestimated his opponents, ignored repeated warnings from the risk management and legal teams, and stubbornly refused to compromise on key terms at the last minute. The other party pulled the rug out from under him, using a loophole in the contract to countersue, while simultaneously leaking a story to the press that Thorne Industries had engaged in predatory tactics. The scandal spread like a virus. The stock price collapsed. Investors panicked. The banks started calling in their loans. The entire company was on the brink of implosion. Vice President Vance, Isabella rounded on him, her voice shrill with rage and disappointment. Wasn't this the deal you personally guaranteed was a sure thing? Is this your global perspective? Do you have any idea what you've done? You've dragged this entire company to hell with you. Isabella, I didn't know they would be so deceitful. Ethan stammered, his voice weak. They set a trap. A trap. Isabella laughed, a horrifying, humorless sound. She rose to her feet, looming over him with undisguised contempt. Business is war. Haven't you ever heard that all's fair? Or were you too busy writing poetry to learn how the real world works? They played you for a fool, and now the rest of us have to pay the price. Ethan was so thoroughly humiliated he looked as if he might faint. Get out. Isabella pointed to the door, her voice a ragged, exhausted hiss. All of you get out now. The executives fled. Ethan stumbled to his feet and staggered out of the room, a picture of utter defeat. Isabella was left alone. She collapsed back in her chair as if her bones had turned to dust. The piercing green line on the projector screen, still ticking downward, felt like a venomous snake coiling around her heart, squeezing tighter and tighter. It's over. The words hammered in her mind. The banks would show no mercy. The shareholders would demand her head. Their competitors would feast on the carcass. The empire her father had built was going to crumble to dust in her hands. Despair, cold and absolute, finally drowned her. She covered her face, and hot tears, the tears she had held back for months, finally broke through the dam of her pride, scalding her palms. What could she do? What was left to do? One name. A name she had tried desperately to forget. A name that now surfaced with blinding clarity in her moment of ultimate desperation, slammed into her consciousness. Julian, only him. Only he had pulled the company back from the brink before. Only he understood the labyrinth of its politics and clients. The thought, once formed, grew like a wildfire, incinerating her pride. Like a drowning woman grasping for a piece of driftwood, she shot to her feet. Forgetting to even wipe the tears from her face, she snatched her car keys from the table and ran. Sometime during the meeting, a torrential downpour had started. Rain hammered against the windshield of her sports car, the wipers on their highest setting barely able to keep up. She floored the accelerator, the car hydroplaning on the slick asphalt. Her mind was a maelstrom of panic, with only one clear, desperate thought. Find Julian. Beg him to come back. She didn't know where he lived. After the divorce, he had simply vanished. Working on a vague memory and a sliver of hope, she drove to the upscale neighborhood where they had once lived, the place he had moved out of. She remembered him mentioning he had rented a small apartment nearby. Drenched and shivering, her expensive suit plastered to her skin, she abandoned her car and ran into the building, her heels sinking into the soaked carpet. She found the apartment number she vaguely remembered. Bang, bang, bang. She pounded on the dark, heavy door with all her strength, the cold metal stinging her fists. Julian, open the door. Julian, I know you're in there. Open up. Her voice was a ragged, sobbing mess, swallowed by the roar of the storm outside. Silence from within. Julian, please, open the door. The company is in trouble, Ethan. He screwed up the Southbridge deal. The stock has crashed. The banks are calling in our loans. The company is going to die, she cried, her words tumbling out in a desperate, incoherent torrent. She pressed her forehead against the cold door, her body shaking from cold and fear. You're the only one who can save it. Julian, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please. Please help me. Help Thorn. Her voice trailed off into a pathetic, broken plea, a sound of utter degradation she never thought she would make. Click. The deadbolt turned. Isabella's heart leaped. He's opening it. He still cares. The door opened a crack. The main lights were off inside, but a dim, yellow lamp in the entryway cast a tall, imposing shadow. Julian stood there in a simple gray sweatsuit, his face unreadable, his eyes as cold and deep as a frozen lake, watching her. That look was colder than the rain, soaking her to the bone. Isabella lunged forward, trying to squeeze through the opening. Julian, Ms. Thorn. Julian's voice, low and flat, cut through her hopes like a shard of glass. He stood firm, his hand braced on the doorframe, making it clear she was not welcome inside. His gaze traveled slowly, clinically, from her drenched hair, over her pale, terrified face, and finally settled on her left hand, which was gripping the doorframe so tightly her knuckles were white. On her ring finger, a simple platinum band reflected the dim, mocking light. Julian's eyes lingered on that ring for 2 long seconds. Then he looked back at her face, a canvas of tears, rain, and desperation. A slow, cold smile spread across his lips, a smile devoid of warmth, filled only with infinite mockery. Now, he said, his voice terrifyingly calm, you are the one who is nothing. As the words landed, he shoved the door. Slam. The heavy door slammed shut with a deafening, final boom, a fraction of an inch from her face, its force a physical blow. It extinguished the sliver of yellow light from within and, with it, the last of her hope. Her world was reduced to the oppressive darkness of the hallway and the relentless, roaring sound of the rain. Chapter 6. The heavy door sealed off the world, muffling the desperate cries and the sound of the storm. Inside, Julian leaned against the cool metal, the dim light of the entryway, casting his face in shadow. The ghost of her pleas, the sight of that ring. It was a delayed poison, 1,000 tiny needles of the pain he thought he had buried. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were clear and still. He walked into the living room, the city lights outside blurred by the rain-streaked windows. His phone vibrated. The screen read, Ryan. His best friend from college, the only one who knew what he'd been doing since he left Thorn Industries. Yeah. Julian's voice was hoarse. Jules, you're not going to believe this. Ryan's voice was electric with excitement. Coleman is in. So are Peterson and Davis. They're all ready to jump ship and come with you. And the seed money, it's in the bank. We're just waiting for you to give the word. Julian's grip on the phone tightened. Coleman, Peterson, Davis. They were the top engineers at Thorn, the true brains of the operation, all of whom had been sidelined and demoralized by Ethan Vance's incompetent leadership. For the past 3 months, Julian hadn't vanished. He had been working in the shadows, leveraging every bit of goodwill and every contact he had ever made, weaving a new web. Good, he said, the single word carrying the weight of a final, irrevocable decision. Tell them the first all-hands meeting for Voyager Innovations is tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. Voyager Innovations? Ryan paused. Then his voice grew even more excited. I love it. We're setting sail, man. Let's show those blind fools at Thorn what they threw away. Julian ended the call and walked to his desk. In a warm glow of the lamp, several thick business plans and market analyses lay open, covered in his dense, handwritten notes, the fruits of 3 months of sleepless nights. He picked up a pen and drew a firm, heavy line under the words Voyager Innovations. Outside, the storm raged, washing the city clean. Inside, in the heart of the tempest, a new journey was about to begin. Chapter 7. 3 months later, the annual Innovate Con, the tech industry's premier event, was in full swing at the city's largest convention center. It was a gathering of giants and rising stars, a battlefield for influence and capital. Isabella Thorn sat near the front, looking poised in a perfectly tailored Navy suit, but it was a fragile facade. The Southbridge deal had left the company crippled. The stock had stabilized, but the damage was done. The banks were circling like vultures, and employee morale was at an all-time low. Ethan Vance had been quietly demoted to an irrelevant position and was now sitting several rows behind her, a ghost at the feast. She was here on a desperate mission to find new investors, a lifeline for her sinking company. But the industry titans who had once courted her now offered only polite, distant greetings. No one was interested in catching the falling knife that was Thorne Industries. And now, please welcome the founder and CEO of the most exciting startup at this year's summit, Voyager Innovations, Mr. Julian Croft, for his keynote address. The core drivers of the new connected age. The MC's voice boomed through the auditorium. A wave of thunderous applause erupted, far more enthusiastic than for any of the established CEOs who had spoken earlier. Isabella froze as if struck by lightning. She looked up at the stage in disbelief. Bathed in the spotlight, a familiar yet transformed figure walked confidently to the center of the stage. Julian. He wore a tailored, dark gray suit, his posture radiating a quiet power. The exhaustion that had clung to him at Thorne was gone, replaced by a sharp, focused energy. His gaze swept calmly over the audience, the look of a man in complete control. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice steady and clear, commanding the attention of the entire room. Isabella's heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. She stared at the man on stage, the man she had cast aside, the man she had scornfully declared would be nothing without her. And here he was, not as a failure, but as the founder of a white-hot tech company that had venture capitalists drooling. His speech was brilliant. No empty buzzwords, just sharp analysis, clear logic, and a visionary roadmap for the future. He detailed the revolutionary technology his team, her former top engineers, had developed. He articulated a business model so disruptive and compelling that the titans in the front rows were nodding in admiration, their faces alight with interest. Isabella felt sick. Every word he spoke was a slap in the face. Every round of applause was a testament to her catastrophic misjudgment. The man radiating brilliance on stage was the same man whose worth she had measured and found wanting. The speech ended with a standing ovation. As Julian walked off stage, he was immediately swarmed by investors, journalists, and competitors, all thrusting business cards at him, desperate for a moment of his time. Isabella watched the scene, her nails digging into her palms. Taking a deep breath, she stood and pushed her way through the crowd toward him. "Julian," she called out, her voice trembling slightly as she reached the edge of the circle. "Can we talk?" The crowd quieted for a moment, all eyes turning to her. Julian was shaking hands with a legendary venture capitalist. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes landing on her. His expression was placid, the look one gives a complete stranger. He didn't say a word to her. He simply gave a polite nod to the investor he was speaking with and seamlessly resumed their conversation, turning his back on her as he did. He treated her as if she were nothing more than a gust of wind. Isabella was left standing there, frozen, the blood draining from her face. The surrounding stares, a mixture of pity, amusement, and curiosity, felt like 1,000 tiny needles. As Julian and his new admirers moved past her, he never gave her a second glance. "Excuse me, Ms. Thorne," a rival CEO said with a smirk as he squeezed past. "You're in the way." Isabella swayed on her feet. As she watched Julian's back disappear into the throng, the cold, hard reality finally crashed down on her with its full, crushing weight. The Julian who had once been hers was gone forever, so far out of reach, she couldn't touch him even if she stood on her toes. Chapter 8. The CEO's office at Thorne Industries was a tomb. The desk was buried under a mountain of default notices, legal threats, and financial reports that bled red ink. The air itself felt thick with the stench of decay. Isabella sat slumped in her chair, a hollowed-out version of her former self. Dark circles under her eyes were visible even beneath a thick layer of concealer. The Queen had been deposed. "Ms. Thorne, the bank. This is their final notice." The CFO's voice cracked. He gently placed a document with a stark red seal on her desk. "If we can't make the first $300 million payment by Monday, they're filing to freeze all corporate accounts and begin asset seizure." Isabella stared at the red seal. It looked like blood. She moved her chapped lips, but no sound came out. Every door was closed. Her father's old contacts were spent. Ethan, the man for whom she had burned down her world, was a ghost, reportedly drinking himself into oblivion. This was the end of the line. Slowly, she pulled open the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside was the small, navy blue velvet box. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The 2 platinum bands lay inside. Her own, and the one Julian had placed back in this box on the day he asked for a divorce. She picked up his ring. The cold metal sent a shiver through her. She traced the inscription inside, their initials and a date she had once thought trivial, a date that now felt sacred. A wild, desperate, last-ditch idea began to form in the ruins of her mind. Late that night, the buzzer of Julian's penthouse apartment rang. He had just finished a video conference and was rubbing the fatigue from his eyes. He glanced at the security monitor and saw Isabella's face, pale and gaunt. Rain plastered her hair to her skull. She looked like a wraith. Julian's jaw tightened. He had no desire to see her. On the screen, she looked up at the camera, her voice coming through the speaker, raw and desperate. "Julian, please, let me in, just for 5 minutes. I have something for you." He hesitated for a moment, then buzzed her in. He wanted to see what final, pathetic card she had left to play. When he opened the door, he blocked the entrance with his body. He wore dark loungewear and radiated an aura of untouchable coldness. "What do you want, Isabella?" She stood in the hallway, dripping water onto the carpet. She looked up at him, at the cool indifference in his eyes, and her heart clenched with a pain so sharp it stole her breath. She held out her trembling hand, palm up. In the dim light of the hallway, a single platinum man's ring lay in her palm, gleaming faintly. "This," her voice was a broken whisper. "Your ring. I kept it. I was wrong, Julian. God, I was so wrong." Tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain. She took a tiny step forward, trying to press the ring into his hand. "Please, for the sake of what we once had, help Thorn Industries. One last time. Just once. If you come back, I'll give you anything. The company. It can all be yours. We can get married again. Please." She had abandoned her last shred of pride, groveling in the dirt for a scrap of his mercy. Julian's gaze dropped from her tear-streaked face to the ring in her hand. The world seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Julian moved. He reached out, but not for the ring. His fingers brushed against her cold, trembling wrist, and then, with a slow, deliberate pressure, he pushed her hand away. The gesture was gentle, yet it was the most definitive rejection she had ever known. "Isabella," he said, his voice low and devoid of all emotion. "Belated affection is cheaper than dirt." He leaned in, his cool breath ghosting against her ear, his voice a chilling whisper that would haunt her forever. "This ring," he paused, his gaze flicking from a platinum band to her desperate face. "And you." He delivered the final blow with chilling precision. "I find you both filthy." He straightened up, took a step back, and without another look at her, he acted. Slam. The heavy door slammed shut with a deafening finality, its verdict absolute. The platinum ring she had offered as her last hope slipped from her numb fingers. It clattered on the cold, hard floor and rolled into a dark corner, its faint light extinguished. Left alone in the hallway, the sound of a woman's soul-tearing, utterly broken sobs finally filled the empty space, a hopeless, desolate sound against the unceasing rhythm of the rain. Chapter 9. The first snow of winter fell, blanketing the city in a quiet shroud, burying the last remnants of Thorn Industries. Stark white notices from the court were plastered across the glass doors of the company's headquarters, a monument to a fallen empire. The building that was once a bustling hub of ambition now stood silent and empty. Bankruptcy, liquidation, asset auction. The headlines were merciless. The accompanying photos showed the sealed doors and Isabella's face, pale and numb, as she was swarmed by reporters. On the other side of the city, in the thriving new tech corridor, the Voyager Innovations logo was a beacon of success atop a gleaming new office tower. Inside his spacious corner office, Julian Croft stood watching the snow fall. On his desk, a stack of documents awaited his signature. On top was the agreement finalizing the acquisition of Thorn Industries' core R&D assets and patents. "Jules, the board is ready for you," Ryan said, poking his head in, his face beaming with success. "On my way," Julian replied. He turned from the window, his expression calm and focused, his eyes fixed on the future. As he passed the front desk, the young receptionist stopped him. "Mr. Croft, a package just arrived for you. It requires a personal signature. Leave it in my office," he said without breaking his stride. "Sir, it's a small box. Zazinda is." She hesitated. "Isabella Thorne." Julian's step faltered for a fraction of a second. Then he continued on as if he hadn't heard, pushing open the glass doors to the main boardroom where his team, his future, was waiting. When the meeting concluded, Julian returned to his office. The small, plain cardboard box sat on the corner of his desk. He picked it up. It was light. He tore it open. There was no note, no letter. Inside, nestled in a bit of tissue paper, was a single, thin platinum wedding band. Her ring. The inscription on the inside glinted under the bright office lights, a final, pathetic echo of a world that no longer existed. Julian looked at it for less than a second. Then he turned and dropped the box, and the ring inside it, into the industrial-grade office shredder by his desk. Whir! The machine hummed to life. The platinum band was mangled, twisted, and then obliterated, disappearing into a rain of metallic dust and shredded cardboard, indistinguishable from the day's other refuse. Julian turned back to the window. The snow had stopped. A sliver of golden sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the clean, white landscape of the city and the bright, limitless road ahead. A faint, unreadable expression crossed his face as he looked into the light. The quiet, resolute look of a man who had cut away the past and was looking only forward. The age of Julian Croft had just begun. The dream of Isabella Thorne, along with her ring, had already been reduced to dust.